Hello and welcome to the SPARK StartHer podcast, where we are dedicated to sharing stories that ignite female entrepreneurs into action. I'm your host, Elizabeth Goede, and I'm here to fan the flame of your entrepreneurial spirit. Each week, we bring to you the inspiring stories of women trailblazers from around the world who have sparked change in their industries, powered their ideas into thriving businesses, and pioneered their way to success. So, whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, a startup enthusiast, or a seasoned business leader, join us as we delve into the journeys of these incredible women whose tales will surely ignite a spark in each one of us. My guest today is Linda Stirling. Linda's background includes running 3 publishing companies. She owns and operates the Publishing Circle with its several imprints. She both publishes authors and coaches them to either sell to publishers or self-publish. Among her successes with others are helping author Lorna Angel 10x her series in 47 countries and rank alongside authors such as Stephen King and George R.R. Martin of the Game of Thrones series. Stirling also got the series optioned for film and television. And that's not all. She's done this with many authors, not to mention all of the awards that she's gotten along the way. Linda does not just help authors, she is one, and an international best-selling author of more than 57 books, sold both under her name and under pseudonyms. She has taken many first-time authors to bestseller status within weeks and even days. Additionally, Linda has successfully acquired movie deals for several of her authors. Linda, it is so amazing to have you here today.
It's a delight to be here, Elizabeth. I really appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully I can encourage some other women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, publishing is, in my mind, whenever I think about all the big publishers and big publishing tycoons, this has certainly been an industry that's been more dominated by men, over the centuries of the existence of the industry. But let's start all the way back. So you've been in publishing for what, more than 40 years? Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And so how did you become interested in publishing to begin with?
Well, believe it or not, at age 8, I knew that I wanted to write books. So by age 17, I was exploring how could I get published, because I knew that there would be steps. So I started with article publishing. At age 17 was my first article that was published. And that was the seed of encouragement that I needed to tell me that, my words would be read. And then as I got older, I knew that I wanted to help others do the same. And so I looked at how can I do that? And people started coming to me too, because they saw my successes. And when I first stepped into actually publishing other people, that was really where I saw kind of the old framework and
Sure.
what I could do within that. And for part of my publishing career, I had to follow the old framework. The framework that's now available really since about 2008 wasn't available. So you couldn't be the kind of indie publisher that you wanted. You certainly couldn't self-publish,
Sure.
unless you had what was considered a vanity book, and there were a lot of those. So the options have really changed, and it's been important for my intellectual growth and my company's growth to continually stay abreast of those changes and move with the times. And now, of course, we've got AI and all of the things that brings to the table, and there's more changes in store because of that. So just staying up to speed and really growing with the industry has been the way that I've done things. And one of the things that I like so much about what you do is you are there for other women. I didn't have a support. If if I could go back and find someone like you who would do that for me, I would. So I had to do a lot of trial and error in order to make things work for me, and then later on for those that I published.
Absolutely. And it even from when I started my career to where things are now, I mean, how much faster could we have built our businesses, right? If we had sort of the support that's happening now, happening back then. So Linda, you worked for other publishers. And so when you started your career, tell me, like, did you start directly as sort of an editor, or where exactly did your venture? I know you started writing books when you were all the way back 8 years old, but tell me more about the professional side.
Well, I wasn't writing books at years old. I wanted to at 8. And probably nothing of those would have been published anyway. So what I had to do was I figured out how I could kind of weasel my way in to the forces that be. And I didn't have the credentials that I needed, but I always had the goal in front of me. So I started with radio. I thought, okay, I can get into the area of media with radio. And I knew that that was a stopping point, but I would write anything that came my way. I was writing radio commercials or going on remotes, and being on those live remotes, which were painful because I had to talk for so long, and some of the subjects were pretty boring. And so from there, I went to newspaper. And in newspaper, again, I didn't have the credentials. So what I did was I thought, well, how can I find my way in? So when I first started in newspaper, it was through the advertising department.
Sure.
In that advertising department, I kept looking, what can I do? What can I do? I studied newspapers from all around the country. This was a daily newspaper. And I looked at what was missing in this newspaper. And ultimately, I saw that there wasn't a really solid, cohesive business page. While I was working in advertising, I was working with a lot of businesses. So what I did was I put together what's called a double truck, which is 2 facing pages. And I mocked up everything on the articles that I would do. I made it look just like I would want it to look in the newspaper. And I put my name as the business editor. So I got my courage all together. I marched into the publisher one day and said, there isn't a business section. I want to do this. I want to be the editor. And here's how I can make it work financially, which was the key component for the newspaper, because I knew I could bring in more advertising. So I was going to do 2 jobs. And when I said, here's how I can make it work financially, the fact that I didn't have any experience didn't matter. And so the publisher, Fran was his name, I'm forever grateful to him for this opportunity. He said to me, can you meet Sunday's deadline? And I said, yes. Well, at that stage, I didn't even know how to work the computers in the newsroom.
I love it.
But I had created that little window of opportunity, and I was determined. So working at night, I asked every guy who was working in sports, because they worked evenings, how to operate the machine. I was afraid at that point, because this was so many years ago. I'd never worked on a computer, which will tell you how long ago. I was afraid if I pushed a button, I might just cause everything to collapse. But I got the article out and the first double truck out. And then some of those sports guys, because they were all men who had helped me figure out the computers, said, that writing sucked. So then I gave myself a new challenge to learn how to be a better writer. And it was things like that. I just looked at um, not from the point of what I didn't have,
Right.
but how I could create something new with what I did have. And what I did have was I had a goal and I had determination. So I knew that by getting articles there, then I started doing articles for their special editions. So it didn't matter what it was. I'd figure out a way to write about fashion, excuse me, or they had a wedding section. These were national that I could write for. So I continued to get credits, all with the goal of getting books out. Then I moved. This was in Oregon. I moved to Oregon. I moved in Southwest Oregon. I moved to Portland, Oregon,
Okay.
and I then was determined. I was still working in newspaper. I always had to have something to hold on to financially so that
Right.
I could then pursue the other part of my goals.
Right.
So I went after what was the only option at that time, which was traditional publishing. And I was close enough to, and I didn't care who it was. I just wanted books
Right.
to get
Right.
my foot in the door. And so I was close enough to this publisher that I would go down once a week with cookies or, whatever, and say, do you have anything for me? I'm ready. And finally, I won them over. They said, well, and they were so hesitant when they offered this. They said, well, we've got something for you, but, and this was the first week of December. We've got something for you, but you may not want it. And I said, I want anything you've got. And they said, well, our deadline is Christmas.
Oh.
So
And what month was this?
this was the first week of December.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Obviously somebody else fell through and they were
Right.
in a pickle, and I was, the potential answer to the pickle. But I had waited for any opportunity I could get. So
Mm-hmm.
I said yes. And I just, burned that old midnight oil, as they
Yep.
say, until I got a book done. That was the inroads. I did 7 books total for that company, some total rewrites of those books. But that gave me book credits that I felt at the time I
Right.
needed to get a traditional book deal. So
And so
that
when you worked on these books to begin with, was this were you sort of noted as being the editor? Were you actually the author? How, because obviously for people who don't really understand how the book industry works, there's sort of many facets, and it's not always the person's name that you see on the book is actually the person who was sort of intimately involved, right?
yes, how things work really depends on the publisher. But to answer your question, I was the author of all of those
Okay,
books.
that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So this is starting. So this is about how long ago? This is
Oh my goodness, those books were published in the 80s, and
okay.
um, I think the last one might have been in the early 90s. I know they're
Okay,
a
PS,
long
for
time
anybody
ago.
who's listening, if you're not a young person, if Linda was using the computer before she was writing these books, I mean, she was using computers that were the size of rooms back then. So to say that she needed to learn how to use a computer wasn't as easy as what we're all doing right now.
Yeah, things have changed. Yeah,
Okay,
so
fantastic. So now you had a handful of books in your own name, and so then you continued in the publishing industry for someone else, or where did you go next after you had these author credits?
well, at that point, I thought I wanted an agent to get a traditional deal. That was the only route at the time.
Hmm.
So I secured an agent, and the agent, the first agent that I had, it was probably 2 months after I secured this New York agent, he died. So,
Oh my gosh.
I wasn't going anywhere with that. And then I just really didn't do a whole lot in pursuing traditional publishing. I just kept writing and tucking things away. Um, I, I then I taught at one of the community colleges, teaching people how to write better, because I put so much work in so that people like those snotty little sports writers couldn't say your writing sucks.
Right.
So I was good at teaching writing skills, and then people started to ask me about publishing. More time passed where I was just coaching,
Sure.
and then when the door opened more for indie publishing, I I very quickly got into that. Worked for I had a company that I worked for as developmental editor. That taught me so much. It was a really small company, so I was doing everything, which I would encourage people, if they have any kind of goal that involves having uh, broad knowledge, that they work for someone else and they fill all the slots. Because
Right.
I was doing everything from getting distribution set up with New York distributors that they said, oh, these guys are owned by the mafia, you'll never get in. And I'm like, well, I'm trying. And so
I love it.
it's just continuing to try to do things, fill whatever shoes need to be filled, explore everything. Um, just really don't put any barriers in front of yourself. Enough people are going to put barriers in front of you without you ever handicapping yourself and saying, I can't do something. There is always a way. I don't care what your educational level is, what your experience is. If you're determined to find a way, there is a way. I really truly believe
Absolutely.
in that.
Absolutely. I think those are really good reminders, Linda, that, a lot of times I'm finding that since Google came about and, we can sort of Google for the answer, right? It's a very common thing. Like, why do we even have questions anymore when we can just Google it? And I think that we lose the nuance of all the things that we can learn along the way by asking the questions, because the answer is not always in the response that you can get from Google, like in the literal answer. It's the thought and the insights that you get from the path, right? The questions that you get along the way.
Mhm.
So the publishing circle.
Mhm.
This is a company that you founded, and you've had this company for, is it about 7 years now? Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
So what inspired you to sort of go from that side of things where you're working for other people, and what inspired you to actually decide that you wanted to start your own business?
Well, I had a business with another individual prior to the publishing circle. Um, that was at the time when publishing didn't have the same opportunities that it has now. She was wonderful. I loved working with her. But at that point in time, you had the need for a lot of money to operate a publishing
Mhm.
company. She had the
Sure.
money, I had the knowledge. Well, when her husband died, she didn't want to do it anymore. But
Right.
I really liked doing that, and I thought, when more opportunities emerged, I thought I loved the doing the publishing part, but I didn't like the traditional publishing format. So I spent time deciding what I would want as a publisher, and or as an author rather, that other publishers weren't offering, because I didn't feel like what traditional publishing offered rather to authors was fair. Traditional
Mhm.
publishing will pay royalties of 3 to 7%.
Mm.
That wasn't enough in my book. Also, if your book wasn't really selling super, super well in the first couple of weeks of that book being out, which is all on the author, by the way, to get that to
Sure.
happen,
Sure.
then your book was just really shelved, but on a back shelf, like
Right.
in the basement. They didn't do anything more with it. Well, I believe that books are always brand new to the person who first reads them and who first needs that content. So I didn't like that component. I didn't like the lack of transparency. Um, Writers will never get the actual reports from distributors, from, as far as I know, from any other publisher. And then also, I didn't like the payment structure, even though it was 3 to 7%. They wouldn't pay for a year. So
Wow.
I'm like, okay, these are the things I want to change. So
Wow.
I took my royalties for the author to 25%. I
Wow.
took my transparency. My authors get the reports from every distributor. So they see exactly what I see as the publisher. And the first month after the book starts making money, it takes some loading time and whatnot, that first month after the money comes in, authors get paid monthly thereafter. So they don't have to wait a year for a paycheck. Not in my publishing company.
So you're not making money off of banking all of their profits so you get the interest. You're not following that sort of like traditional bank model, right? Where they're making all the interest off of you keeping your money there.
My my whole model is different. There's nothing other than the distribution that mirrors what traditional publishing does. I can distribute anywhere that a traditional publisher does. So that, there's real strengths in that. And starting my company this way and having the transparency, having the success with the publishers the authors that I've worked
Right.
with, that's what's helped build my company. Almost everyone who's come to me has come, I'd say probably somewhere over 90% has been referrals from my existing authors because they're happy with me. And that makes my heart happy that
Absolutely.
they're appreciative.
Well, I mean, how fortuitous for you to sort of have had the career that you've had the experience that you've had. I mean, also being an author yourself, you've been able to sort of identify and the opportunities of improvement, let's say, within the traditional, setup for the publishing industry. What would you say when you decided, and maybe this also is relevant when you had your business partner too, but when you sort of left the traditional sort of bigger side of publishing, and you decided to start your own company, your own publishing company, what would you say was the most difficult thing about doing that? Like, what was the most difficult part about starting your own business?
Well, twofold. Finding the authors initially, although that within, gosh, probably about 3 months, it was like, you don't have to worry about that, Linda. They're coming in. But there's another component that comes back to how I run my system. In order for me to do this, I didn't have the wealthy partner for this.
Right. Right.
I had to self-fund, and by doing that, that meant that I was covering all of the initial setup,
Sure.
covering my time, which I've got to keep my doors open to electricity on and all that. So the
Absolutely.
model that I came up with was one where I asked the author to pay an initial fee that would cover all of the editing. So traditionally, when you pay for editing, the big publishers now want you to do that in advance,
Hmm.
but paying for the editing is going to cost, depending on the length of the book and depending on if you need developmental editing, line editing,
Sure.
proofreading, all of those things. It's going to run somewhere around $5,000.
Sure.
And then you've got your cover designs, your interior designs, and there's a lot of other fees. So
Absolutely.
I went with the lowest fee that I possibly could and still have some seed money for advertising, which is another component that's different that I forgot to talk about. So most books, I'm charging a fee of $10,000. That
Sure.
covers everything. So
That seems very reasonable to me. I mean,
if you look at what other indie publishers are doing, they're charging double, even triple that. So it's quite low. But I saw myself as being in a partnership with the author because then I would make my money off of the royalties. So coming back to the 25%, how I did things differently was the author got 25%. I took the same amount as the author, 25%. But the magic formula that I came up with was to put 50 cents of every book sale back into the ongoing paid advertising of a book. As far as
very
I know,
smart.
there's no other publisher who does that. That
No.
keeps the book alive. And then I run all of the advertising, do any split testing for those who know what split testing is. Just seeing if different ad copy might work better and running it on the different platforms. But that keeps the book alive. And then that initial amount that the author puts in, there's never anything more. And again, that's a difference between me and a lot of indie publishers. They'll say, well, if you just gave us, $5,000, we could get a great name to endorse your book or whatever. I just don't play that game because I'm an author myself. I want my authors to be treated the way that I like to be treated.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing too is, I mean, it's so refreshing, first of all, to hear just even your entire philosophy. I think is just it almost makes me get verklempt. But I think the other piece is that what you're saying is I am going to make my money off of your success. I'm not going to make my money off of the fact that you think that you have a book that can be sold and we're just going to basically publish it so you can be published. You're saying, listen, we're going to go through this because you deserve to be in front of other people. I love it so much. It makes my heart so happy. So Linda, would you say that the hardest thing then about starting your business was really sort of getting the financial structure worked out? I mean, it was figuring out sort of what to charge your authors, but also making sure that you had enough to support. I mean, your business obviously takes cost. It's not, there are physical costs to creating a book. It's not like a digital service. So is that fair to sum it up that way?
Yes. And the fact that I was charging, I got immediately lumped into the category of these spam publishers.
Oh, sure.
And, that continues to be a battle because there are a lot of so-called publishers who take your money. They may get your book up on Amazon, but then that's the end of what they do. And their fees can be pretty steep. I would recommend that people, and I actually have this on my website, go to Author Beware and check those people out. And some of those companies are actually offshoots of some companies that you think you could trust. So a writer just has to be really, really on guard. There's so many scams. And so being lumped in with those has been a lot of work, of sharing exactly how I operate so people can see, letting my authors speak for me because they know how they've been treated. That I think that's probably been the most challenging thing for me. Initially coming up with all the aspects of what I wanted it to look like and how I could make this work financially for both me and the authors. That took a lot of thinking and planning to make that happen. But once I was solid on that, move ahead.
Absolutely. Well, so did you do that as like a form of testing? Like, did you test a bunch of different sort of pricing structures to sort of see where you were going to get to the right profit mix, et cetera, in the beginning? Or did you really spend more time doing calculation of like what you did in the past and figuring out? So or was it a combination of both? How did you actually arrive at the right structure?
Well, remember, I have 57 books of my own.
Right. Right.
So I couldn't do anything with those traditionally published books. So take 7 books out of that equation. But I could experiment with my own. And I didn't want to experiment with another author's books. So I experimented with those books to see, and with new books that I wrote after I came up with my publishing concept. And I played with that to see what I could do. But frankly, every book is an experiment. What works for one author might not work for another. Some authors come with a huge email list. Other authors don't even know what an email list is. So it really depends so much on both the author and the book. I don't take on any book that I don't believe I can sell. And I never promise that I can sell because what I think doesn't always work.
Sure.
But I'm rigid in what I take on. And I'm also quite rigid about who I take on. I was just talking with the most lovely gal yesterday. And I said to her, I just want to be working with people that I know if they call me on the phone, I'm happy to pick up the phone.
Yes, there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of truth to that. I felt like I got to a point in my career where I just only wanted to work with people I liked. I was sort of like, I just didn't have enough stamina to not.
Yeah.
So I get it. I
Yeah,
totally.
life's too short to work with people that are demanding or just kind of ugly in their behavior. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, turning from sort of the not, this is a really good transition actually. So we're turning from sort of the obstacle, right? Like the things that were difficult. What are the best parts of having your own business? What was the best part of transitioning?
Oh, yeah, I love this. So as I shared earlier, I always had to have some foundation of other work. And then my publishing, my writing, my coaching that was another part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
So when, years ago, I've been independent for a long time, but years ago, having to ask someone
Right.
to beg someone, I should say, to take time off if your child was sick or if you were sick, it's just, that just doesn't feel right. It feels icky. So not having to ask anyone else if I needed time for whatever it might be, even if it was just for fun, I love that freedom. Since I have so many authors on board now, it's just such a joy to work with people who have the same goals as you have, who, where we work together. That's another huge difference between me and other publishers. I see us as a team, not as a dictator, which is what a lot of publishing companies are. And having the joy of their success, it just lights up my heart. It's working with, because I've chosen my people carefully, or they've chosen me. Maybe you could look at it like that.
Right.
Having those people around me and celebrating in their successes, it's just such a delightful part of what I do.
Oh my gosh, I love it so much. So what would you say, and this is a little bit of an unusual question, but what would you say was the biggest surprise about having your business?
How many referrals I was getting from my authors. I thought I'd have to work a lot harder at bringing in new business, but because I was so devoted to my authors, they just, without me asking, they're like, "Oh, I'm sending so and so to talk to you,"
Mm.
and that that's helped in so many ways. Obviously, new business, but also I haven't had to pay to do a lot of promotions to promote my company. It's right now it continues to expand just on its own. Doesn't mean I might not do some of that in the future, and I'm actually looking at some expansion plans. But that coming in on a regular basis was just really, really rewarding and surprising.
Well, I think that says a lot about, of course, my background is branding, and you know that you've made it when your customers are basically your ambassadors, right? They sell for you for nothing, and I think that shows what an incredible company that you've built, that people are referring to you. I mean, what a huge compliment, right?
Well, and I just want to compliment you because you know how to teach people how to do that. I had to figure it all out on myself by myself. I mean, all of it I figured out by myself. Would my company be a decade ahead, 2 decades ahead? Yes, if I'd had someone like you. So, I would just encourage people that are listening to find yourself in Elizabeth.
Well, thank you, Linda. That's so nice. I'm gonna file that away in my love file, which I encourage everyone to have. If you've never heard of it, it's whenever you get a nice compliment, someone says something nice about you, you accomplish something, a big milestone, you put it in your love file, and that way, if either you need to do something with that. So if you're working a traditional job, sometimes you refer to those files when you need to put together for your next position. But it's also like when you're really having a tough day, which we've all had those really tough days, especially when we own our own business, they're really nice to reflect back to, pump yourself back up. So forgive me for digressing down that love file.
Well, I totally support that because, I said that, I've had people attack me saying, I was a scam publisher. And so it hurts. I won't say that it doesn't. But then I go to my file where I've got all my author testimonials and just all the messages and from some of my own books too, where people have said, you made a difference in my life.
Oh.
Those are the kinds of things that you need, because those ugly voices are the voices that, if you allow them to, are the loudest voices. And so you
Yeah,
have to find a way to crowd those out.
they sure are. They sure are. So one of the benefits, of course, as you mentioned, is being able to sort of have flexible time and be able to have free time. And I know that you and I have sort of talked about this piece, but you are a master gardener.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk a little bit about that. I know that we exchanged some. You grow how many varieties of tomatoes?
Well, my true love is flowers, but I'm a little obsessive. I think I've got 32, I want to say, varieties that I got seeds started for this year. And oh gosh, probably approaching 30 of peppers. And here's the crazy thing, Elizabeth. I don't eat raw tomatoes. I don't eat raw peppers. I'm just obsessed because those catalogs are so horrific. They look so good. And the descriptions, oh my goodness, the descriptions that those people have written about these varieties, even though I don't eat either one of those raw, it makes me want to. So I grow them and then I share them.
Well, I can tell you, Linda, what I do with our tomatoes is, I mean, we do eat some of them raw, but I'm Sicilian by background. And so my family, we can tons of tomatoes, and we do them as sauce, and we do them as tomatoes that then we can, sort of a little bit have like that fresh flavor, later into the year when we can't grow the tomatoes. So I'm going to have to find myself out with you, and we're going to have to can some of those. Otherwise, what are you doing? Feeding like the homeless? What are you doing with all those tomatoes?
Well, I do can, and then I'll make sauces and
Okay.
tomato leather. That is
Tell
really
me
good.
about tomato leather.
Yeah, so you dry it in a food dryer. I put the original Mrs. Dash on
Yeah.
that. I mean, I lay it on heavy, and it's really spicy. I like the tomato leather. It's just like candy to me. But I have a big family. So when I go to see my family, the back of my car has quarts after quart after quart. I mean, 'cause I'm one person. I'm not eating the produce from all those tomatoes. And then all my neighbors know that I've got an abundance of things for them, and those are just some of the veggies. I grow a lot that I actually eat too.
Well, I love it. So I'm sorry to dive down into this tomato leather because I've not, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with it. So is this like you just slice the tomato and you do it as just like a flat slice and do it
Yeah,
that
you
way?
want to do it very thin. In the food dryers, because tomatoes are mostly water-based,
Right.
you have to have, and you can buy the silicone sheets that you put on your food dryer, and they take a long time to dry. And I just let them dry there. You do them very, very thin, and even if if they kind of fall apart, just kind of scrunch them together, and they'll dry together. And then I just put those in quart jars in the refrigerator, and I have some that are probably a couple of years old that are still good. So
Wow, that is
taking
fantastic.
taking all the water out of them like that, and I imagine some of the new kind of expensive, but if you've got a big family, they might be worth it. Some of the new freeze dryers, that would be
Mhm.
easy too.
Yeah, I have not. My family always gives me a hard time. I love kitchen gadgets. Love them. That is not, I do not have an ability to freeze dry yet. So
Yeah,
everybody stays.
yeah, right. Yeah, there's there's always things that you can do, and it to me it's one of my forms of relaxation is just growing things, and the vegetables are one part, but I'm a flower nut. I really, and that's what I hybridized. I didn't hybridize any tomatoes or peppers yet.
I love it. I love it. And what an interesting, I think about like even what you do as a publisher is you help sort of grow authors, right? So it's such an interesting parallel that are also growing actual, plants and flowers. And we're going to have to get some pictures of this beautiful garden that you have. So the last thing is if you were going to give any advice to someone that's looking to start their own business, any woman who's looking to start her own business, what would you say is the advice that you wish you had gotten when you started your business?
um, I'll give you the advice that I would give them, the
Oh,
advice that I didn't have. I mean, it wasn't available at the time, or at least from anyone that I knew, is find a mentor. Um, Back when I started, there just weren't any mentors. So find a mentor. Work for free if you have to. I spent a lot of time doing things that I didn't get paid for in order to learn, but learn from the best. You if you're determined, then you will find a way in, whether it's donating your time or just whatever it might be. But find a mentor, get a coach. If you have to work a second job to get a coach,
mhm.
do that. If you're not willing to do that, then you need to evaluate whether you're really serious. If you aren't willing to take extra steps, and that's okay if you're not, you may have had an idea and it's really not the right path for you to go down. But if you can give it up easily, then give it up.
Yeah.
Otherwise, put the work in that you need to do, both with mentorship and with coaching, to rise as quickly as you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a great insight and feedback, and even the being willing to work for free part. I think it's also like being able, and also you highlighted, reaching out to sort of like the people that are experts in the industry. And I do think that sometimes, it's like that idea of like the scarcity mindset, right? It's like you let your financials depict or direct where you're going to get the feedback, but you'd be surprised how many people are willing to sort of give help and mentorship and leadership and oversight, even from any walks of life. I don't care if they're the CEO of a company. So really, really good insights. Thank you so much, Linda.
Yeah. And don't work for free forever. I'm just saying,
No,
until you become skilled.
no, in the beginning. Yeah, no, I would say this. I don't think anybody should ever apologize, especially women, in charging for anything, and especially charging what it's worth. I mean, you need to make a profit, and you need to make sure you're making a profit in your business. So I know you said that earlier. I want to reiterate that for anyone that's listening, since I went down that trail of, being willing to donate your time. If you're donating your time, it should be for something in return, right? Which is where you're getting the education or the insights that you need in order to make your business better. It shouldn't be, volunteering to take the trash out.
And I would just add that don't underprice yourself because you're female.
Right.
That's one of the things that you really need to stand up for yourself and get the kind of income that your male counterparts are getting. You can be just as talented, but it's not going to be reflected to the person who wants to buy from you if you're not charging what you're worth.
That is such good advice, Linda. That is brilliant. So I'm going to ask for two last things. One is, you've shared so much incredible insight. You offer such an incredible service. How do people find you? How do they get a hold of you?
I'm happy to have people email me directly. It's just Linda at the Publishing Circle, or you can go to my website of the same name. But I'm easy to reach. I'm easy to reach on social media as well.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And then the last thing is, I always ask all of my guests to summarize up in one word or a short phrase of what bit of inspiration you would offer to another female entrepreneur or woman looking to start her business.
I have a motto that I do my best to live by, and I would encourage others to come up with something like this for themselves. And my motto is, in all you do, be the blessing.
Oh, gosh, I love that so much. That's so beautiful. Linda, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights, your amazing background, and just really providing such a positive and inspirational path for other people to emulate. And for everyone else, thank you so much for joining and listening to the Spark Starter podcast today. It's been an absolute pleasure to bring you the uniquely inspiring stories that ignite our female entrepreneurs into action. I've been your host, Elizabeth Goede, and on behalf of all the inspiring women entrepreneurs out there, I encourage you to not only dream big, but to ignite those dreams into action. Remember, every spark can lead to an extraordinary fire. So keep those sparks alive for today, tomorrow, and the vibrant future beyond. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to never miss a spark. Until next time, stay ignited. All right. So for anybody who is still here with us, I know that we still have a couple of people watching live. Does anybody have any questions for Linda that we can get answered right now? Linda, in the meantime of seeing if anyone has any questions or feedback, because sometimes there's a little bit of a delay, I just want to let you know we got a lot of very, very positive comments today.
Ah, how nice. Thank
Yeah,
you, everyone.
we had Nika came in and said we need to advocate for ourselves. So she was agreeing. We have a Facebook user who, was happy to see us together. And we had Stephanie who said she absolutely loved the conversation. So it's been.
Well, and Nika, I love Nika.
Me
Nika
too.
is one of my authors. We're getting ready to publish her book. Actually, I Can, which is so fabulous. And it's one of the books that I'm the most excited about releasing out into the world. So I'm so glad Nika could be on the call.
Yeah, I'm so excited too, and I actually was very fortunate to get an advance copy of Nika's book, and I told her it is just everything in that book, and I can't wait. I hope she's going to be on the show to talk about her book. But Nika's an incredible inspiration to everyone, and just like the most positive and funny and helpful person out there. So I love that she's working with you, Linda. You guys seem like an absolute perfect match
Well,
together.
it feels like it to me. And I will say that, in the vein of Nika being so positive, when you're working for yourself, you need to find people who are positive to surround yourself with. It Having your own business is, it's not all a treat. It's a lot of work, and there's often no one to encourage you. So if you have those people like Nika who just say you're doing great, or I appreciate you, or hang in there, or whatever it might be, find those people and then be the same for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say you do need those people, right? I mean, not every, as you mentioned, I mean, having a business is hard, and there are certainly ups and downs. And it's a little bit like every day that you have your business is sort of like a brand new day, right? There are no repeats, I think, at least from my experience. I don't know if you've had the same, Linda, but
Yeah. Yeah.
there's always something new that's an interesting challenge. There's always something new that's a positive that you never saw coming. It's a roller coaster of emotions, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. And that's what makes it fun. I mean, you wouldn't want everything to be so complacent and easy and boring. So, having that variety, which I like because I've got such a variety of authors, but also staying on your toes with the experiences that come your way. Amazon changes, it seems like, almost on a daily basis.
Right.
So staying on top of things like that, and whatever anyone's industry is, you're going to have changes. And so celebrate those, and be grateful that you have a heart for learning. That's another component to having your own business that I think really helps is uh, embracing continuing growth in all areas.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I want to thank everyone for who joined us live today. And certainly, again, just thank you, Linda, for sharing all of your insights. And for everybody online, we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for being here.